The Mueller investigation is over, yet it seems nobody in Washington is satisfied with how things turned out. For the president, the collusion exoneration wasn't enough. Now he and his allies want revenge, it appears, on those who supported the Russia probe in the first place.
There are a lot of people out there that have done some very, very evil things, very bad things, I would say treasonous things. Those people will certainly be looked at.
His 2020 campaign even sent out a list of people they think TV news networks should ban from their programs over collusion comments. But the Democrats Trump is threatening to investigate are focused on the questions they say the Attorney General's summary of Mueller's report did not answer.
We need the full Mueller report and the underlying documentation to be made public.
Full transparency and disclosure are critical.
Given these questions, it is imperative that the Attorney General release the full report.
While the president says he is on board,
Up to the Attorney General, but it wouldn't bother me at all.
one of his allies in the Senate, that's Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, blocked a resolution from Democrats to demand the full report's release. So as the fight for the full report continues, some major questions go unanswered, including why Mueller chose not to make a prosecutorial recommendation on obstruction of justice, and why Attorney General William Barr chose to step in and make his own. In his summary, Barr explained that he, quote, noted that the special counsel recognized the evidence does not establish the president was involved in an underlying crime related to Russian election interference, and that while not determinative, the absence of such evidence bears upon the president's intent with respect to obstruction. Is that legalese for no collusion, then no obstruction? Anyone have Martha Stewart's phone number? With more than a dozen investigations still going on into the president, his campaign, his inaugural committee, and his businesses over campaign finance violations, potential tax fraud, and more, it's clearly not over till it's over. Two former U.S. attorneys join me now. Don Stern, appointed by Bill Clinton, worked alongside Robert Mueller, both during a stint with the Department of Justice and in private practice at Hale and Dorr. Don, it's good to see you. Michael Sullivan, appointed by George W. Bush. He's now a partner with the Ashcroft Group. Michael, it's good to see you, too.
Thank you, Jim.
Anything have you still shaking your head 48 hours after the release of the 4-page Barr letter, Michael?
Oh, what shakes my head is why did it take 2 years to essentially get to the position to determine that there was no collusion by the Trump campaign?
How do you answer that?
I think there were some people clearly were trying to find it as opposed to recognizing it was never going to be there.
Is Bob Mueller one of those people?
I don't think so. I think Bob is an honorable, decent human being. I think he was in search of the truth. But the fact of the matter is they invested a tremendous amount of resources. 40 agents spend full time looking at this over the last couple of years, 20 lawyers. It's cost the government, taxpayers, a tremendous amount of money to conclude what? The Trump campaign did not collude with the other Russians.
So he's shaking his head over that. Anything you're still shaking your head at, Don Stern?
Well, first of all, I have to say I totally disagree with Mike. I mean, it was a very thorough investigation involving a tremendous amount of resources, to be sure. But out of that came any number of indictments. Many leads were followed, and the key point was, Russia attempted to meddle into the election of the United States of America, and the president.
We knew that before. The intelligence.
Well, but the president never allowed that. Never admitted it was true.
Well, he's still not admitting.
Still doesn't admit it. What surprised me was the obstruction issue. So, as we know, Bob Mueller basically punted on whether a crime was committed in terms of obstruction of justice. I was surprised about that because there are two possible theories, the first of which I discount. One is that he's the kind of prosecutor that can't make a decision, and therefore, on one hand this, on the other hand that, he couldn't decide. Anyone who knows Bob Mueller, has observed Bob Mueller, he is, if anything, professional, thorough, and decisive.
So what's the other?
The other one is that there was some reason why, either legally or factually, he thought that he shouldn't be deciding that, and thought that it was more consistent with his role as a special prosecutor here to essentially let all the facts hang out. The good facts
and let all the
bad
facts hang out on collusion. Why didn't he do it on both?
Well, maybe he thought it was either a close case, or maybe he thought that since you couldn't indict the president, maybe thought that it would be more consistent and more transparent.
Well, but Barr in his letter specifically says that was not a consideration.
Not a consideration for Barr. He didn't say what Mueller was
By the
thinking.
way, did either of you ever not make a recommendation if it was appropriate, like he did in this case? He did not in this case in anything to your superior. Did you ever not make a recommendation?
No, I don't ever recall any instance at all.
You recall any?
No.
Did you ever, in a case where you decided that there wasn't a crime committed, make a public statement that the person you investigated was not exonerated like Mueller did?
Well, it's rare that the U.S. government essentially announces that somebody is not exonerated. You know, to me, I think the reason why there was no recommendation for obstruction is because there was not sufficient facts to essentially establish that a crime had been committed by the president, that there is no obstruction.
So why didn't you just say that?
I don't know why he didn't say it. Maybe he felt...
He's willing to say no collusion. Why can't he go the whole 9 yards?
Maybe he's saying, I'm going to defer to the Department of Justice. I think if Bob Mueller had determined that there was an ability to bring an obstruction charge based on what he did during the course of this investigation, he would have brought it.
Ken Starr from Whitewater said on Fox News yesterday that he thought the actions by Mueller on this issue, the punting, as you say, some people call it, was neither wise nor courageous. Would you agree with him?
Yes, I would.
Would you?
Yeah.
You know, I think we need to see the full Mueller report. This is an additional reason why it really serves the public interest to see what the underlying reasoning was. You know, I'm tempted to say, to be critical of Bob Mueller for not making that decision, but until we know what the underlying facts are and the reasons for his decision, I think we have to wait.
Was I right about my snide comment there about Martha Stewart? It seems to me in the Scooter Libby case, former aide to Vice President Cheney, obviously the Valerie Plame thing, the conclusion, and with Martha Stewart, no underlying crime, but they were both convicted of obstruction of justice. So despite what Barr says, there is precedent for finding someone obstructed justice,
Absolutely.
even if there is no
Well, you need a criminal
crime.
intent, though, in order to obstruct
Well, I understand
it.
that, but that's a separate issue.
Well, but I think that's part of the factor that Attorney General Barr is talking about.
So why
that
didn't he talk to the president and find out if there was criminal intent?
Well, I think he concluded that there was not, you know, based on the evidence that had been developed.
You know,
and everything that the president did, he did publicly. So it wasn't like he was trying to secretly do something. And how did he obstruct
perverse
justice?
is that, though? We were talking about this last night, by the way. It seems to me, I'm so glad to hear you say that, Michael, that one of the reasons he was not charged with obstruction of justice, or at least put aside charge, that there was not enough to say that he had obstructed justice, was that he did it publicly. And because he did it publicly, if he had said privately to an aide what he said to Lester Holt on NBC television, you'd charge him, wouldn't you?
I wouldn't. No, I'm not going to jump to that conclusion that I would charge him based on those facts. But obstructing what? By firing Jim Comey? I mean, the fact of the matter is the recommendation to fire Jim Comey came from the Deputy Attorney General, and I think Jim Comey should have been fired.
You think, from above, or no?
Well, this Deputy Attorney General, I suspect not.
You know, there is, this hasn't been talked about at all. My understanding is there was an FBI counterintelligence operation. Andy McCabe, former head of the FBI, has talked about this, to investigate if the president was actually a Russian agent. It's almost unbelievable to say these words. We have no idea if Mueller picked that up. This was after Comey, so we have no idea if Mueller picked it up, whether it's part of this report. We have no idea what happened to that thing. Is that correct?
Well, I heard McCabe's comments on 60 Minutes.
Yeah.
It was purely speculative. It was essentially, they opened up an investigation against the president based on pure speculation. That suggests to me that there's some type of political motivation behind it.
I want to talk about political motivation in a second. One more thing, though. Talking about your past experience, I asked you before about a couple of things. When the high-profile prosecution of an individual or charging of an individual is ruled out by either an attorney general or a special counsel like was done here, when we get down to the level that you were at, like the Southern District of New York, where we know there's a case, and we know there's Manhattan DA, there are cases, New York State, does that affect, I mean, honestly, I know you say politics never has anything to do with anything, but as a matter of reality, does that affect the judgment that you guys exercise on cases when the big fish, the big case has been resolved, and like this has been resolved? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I understand the point.
And would it?
I think you're probably just going to be extra cautious and careful about the ultimate decision you're going to make.
Is that what you'd say?
You know, I think it comes into play to the extent that you got to be always thinking about how the jury is going to hear it. So if the big fish,
because they knew about this, okay.
Well, to the extent of if you're trying a case and let's say the CEO of the company doesn't get charged, but the number 6 person does get charged, you got to be thinking about what does the jury think.
I want to get back to what you said about political intent in another setting. I mentioned the Southern District of New York. Obviously, that's the Cohen case, the hush money case. Stormy Daniels, former lawyer, is now a defendant. After Michael Avenatti was bailed out, $300,000 I think it was last night, here's what he had to say.
For the entirety of my career, I have fought against the powerful people and powerful corporations. I will never stop fighting that good fight. I am highly confident that I will be fully exonerated and justice will be done.
He sues the president. He was going to run for president, all this sort of thing. Is it a stretch to say that the decision by a contributor to and friend of the president, who's now the Southern District and New York U.S. Attorney, that prosecution of Avenatti, or at least the timing of the prosecution coming like it did yesterday, may have been politically motivated?
I think absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely.
The timing either?
The timing as well. I think the timing had probably more to do with what California was doing in terms of announcing charges than anything else.
Did you think the same thing, for example, when Cy Vance, a Manhattan DA, decided to file what many people are called pardon insurance after Manafort got sentenced? Manafort, you're smiling, so obviously you thought that was politically motivated.
I do.
That was, but this isn't.
Yes.
Was Berman's decision?
I don't think it was. I mean, I've read the FBI affidavit accompanying the criminal complaint, and there was actually only about a week between Avenatti's first attempt to shake down Nike and the arrest. So I don't think the timing was held back because of the Mueller report.
Speaking of timing, sadly, we only have a minute left. Everybody knows that Jussie Smollett charges dropped today. One of the weirdest things I've ever seen. Prosecutor doesn't speak, puts out a statement saying community service, and he's going to forsake the $10,000 that he posted. The mayor and the police chief never even heard about this until we all heard about this. What's your takeaway? I know we don't know much now. What's your takeaway just a few hours after the fact, Michael?
I'm offended by it, and I don't even live in Chicago, but I think with the tremendous resources that Chicago devoted to it, they have a right to know the underlying circumstances as to why community service and $10,000 is sufficient.
If you had ever done that when you were the U.S. Attorney, what would your relationship with the FBI be like the next day?
Well, if I did it as a district attorney, I likely wouldn't be elected again, to be honest with you. I would have no relationship with the police department.
Quickly, 15 seconds, Don.
It's very distressing. I mean, race and law enforcement, it can be a very combustible mix, particularly in Chicago. And for that to play out the way it did, with the chief of police not being no communication between the prosecutor is very distressing. I don't get it.
Let's make it unanimous. Michael, it's great to see you.
Good seeing you, Jim.
Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it,
Okay,
Don, you as well.